Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am. I've been looking forward to rapid fire all day.
All right, so let's do it. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Michael Mayer has earned consensus All-American status in spite of not winning the Mackey Award.
It is laughably hypocritical that he has become consensus means that you have to get majority vote from people who, there's not as many All-American voters as there are Heisman voters, I'm pretty sure. And so to get consensus, that means majority. So how can majority of, people say that he's an All-American and consensus meaning, probably best tight end in the country, yet he can't win the Heisman? So I just think, to me, this proves my point that certain people need to have their Heisman ballots revoked because there's...
Well, not Heisman, but Mackey.
Or sorry, Mackey. Mackey. Sorry, I'm getting all these terms mixed up. But these guys, some of their votes need to be revoked because there's a clear bias. And again, if you just look at the numbers, the grades, and all aspects of what it means to be a tight end, Michael Mayer has him beat in every category. And it seems that the All-American voters saw this, but for whatever reason, the Mackey voters didn't.
Yeah. And now, to be clear, to be a consensus All-American, there are 5 major All-American teams. To be a consensus, you have to be an All-American in at least 3, a first-team All-American in at least 3 of those 5 NCAA-recognized All-American selectors. And so what that means, kind of what you were alluding to, is a vast majority of the people voting for these things thought much more highly of Michael Mayer than the Mackey Award, whatever committee or group or whatever happens to vote for that. So, it would be great if Michael Mayer were walking out of college with the Mackey Award, which I think anyone who watched him play for the last 3 years would agree that he deserves. But at the same time, he'll walk out of here as a consensus All-American, and there's still in the history of Notre Dame football, there's still a relatively short list of consensus All-Americans to come through Notre Dame. So it is still a monstrous achievement that Michael Mayer ended up accomplishing. So Notre Dame has they brought in a grad transfer kicker for a second straight year. And this one is Spencer Schrader from USF after they brought in Blake Grupe last year. Do you buy or sell that they should just go the transfer route in most years rather than recruiting high school kickers?
Yeah, I think that it can be a nice hybrid combination of the both. And I say that because I think there's something to be said about signing a 4-year guy every 2 or 3 years that you're kind of developing in-house. But unfortunately, it takes time for some of these kickers to get, acclimated to college football. So I don't think there's anything wrong you're still developing, maybe this younger guy and providing some sort of competition, but having a grad transfer guy who's done it before, right? Like Grupe was the number 1 scorer for his program all time. He's tough as nails. He's mentally tough as nails. He's been in the big time situations before. I know he struggled a little bit this year, but no kicker's perfect unless you're Justin Tucker. But at the end of the day, I think there's a nice combination of signing a 4-year guy out of high school every 2 or 3 years, but I don't think it's something that should be sought after every single season. And it's nice to have I guess you could say like a fallback or a kind of protection blanket with this grad transfer who you can definitely rely on, as the season goes on, essentially.
Yeah, and I think that unless you are getting like the elite of the elite kicker every year, and even then, there have been some elite kickers who have, not panned out well once they get to college. Like, get a guy who's tested, get a guy who's proven, who's done it for 3 or 4 years already, like these guys we're talking about. Go out and get him, not quite ready for the NFL, but he can still, like this Schrader guy, he's booted a 52-yarder in his career, and as long as he's accurate and he's got a pretty good leg, you've got someone who's been in pressure situations and shown that he can do it at the college level already. I think it's probably a pretty good route to go with the portal what it is right now. I think that that it is a much more reliable route to go. And then, like you said, rather than spending a scholarship on a high school kid, an unproven scholarship kid, maybe you do it, every second or third cycle while you can, you continue to go out and kind of scour the transfer portal and bring in some veterans. Because, the other thing is when you've got these young guys in your program, even though maybe you've got a veteran kicking in front of them, they still have plenty of practices to show what they can do. So you get a pretty good idea of what they can do over the course of the season. So I think the transfer portal is a good route to go when you're talking about kickers.
Side note, my favorite thing, because everyone thinks kickers, they show up. What is there really to do? You're just kicking for, 4 or 5 periods of practice. One of my favorite things that we did in college is our coaches put pressure situations on our kickers, whether that be if they hit a 40-yard field goal, we're not doing conditioning today, or, these type of things. It just, talking about this kind of made me think about it. I like that aspect of, providing some of these kind of high leverage situations for these kickers in practice.
Yeah. Crystal wants to know when transfer players can come in. Basically, once the second semester begins, they can get here. And now, technically, so we were talking about Cassandra Prosper earlier. The second semester, I've been told, technically begins when finals end. So, even though classes have not officially begun, if the football team were to show up before the second semester began and they were to start workouts, then a transfer could be there with them, as long as he has been admitted and, has all his paperwork, ready to go and all that kind of stuff, they can go. And like Cassandra Prosper, she's going to start practicing with the team, and she's already joined the team and she's enrolled for the second semester. And as soon as finals are over, she is eligible to begin playing in games after that. And, they'll play, Notre Dame plays this weekend at Virginia Tech. They play next Wednesday, a week from today, against Western Michigan. And then they will, after the holidays, they will go down to Miami, and that will be, the first game after, finals and everything are over. So she would technically be eligible to play at that point. And it's the same for transfer. Again, it's not like you're going to plop in. I don't think that you could do it in the course of the, football is a little different since there's, a little bit of overlap there, like if you were transferring in and that kind of stuff. But once the second semester begins, you're pretty much good to go. Fill in the blank, Jess. You feel blank about Deion Sanders after his first couple weeks on the job at Colorado.
I feel, I feel, I feel just as excited as I did. And I think that he's already proven, he's going to go out and get his guys. I know Dylan Edwards, it was, whether you want to say it was, big recruit or not, Dylan Edwards was the number 2 player in Kansas and number 10 nationally in a position, and is definitely a speedster. So, I don't think really anything has changed with Deion Sanders and the situation at Colorado. And in fact, I think if anything, it's improved. I think that we're only going to see more and more of this, especially, once the season officially ends and we see the transfer portal, the days in which the transfer portal closes. I think you're going to see a lot more guys deciding to go towards Colorado. But I am just as excited, if not more excited, for what's ahead for Deion Sanders at Colorado. I know that he's not everyone's cup of tea, but I love his swagger. I love his enthusiasm. And I love that he ultimately he wants to win. And as your head coach, there's nothing more than you want to play for a guy who wants to win at any cost. And I think that's what Deion Sanders wants to do.
Yeah. And I mean, he's going to be trouble. This guy was one thing when he was down there at Jackson State and he was, recruiting at FCS level and HBCU and all that kind of stuff. Even if he swiped a big time recruit away from Florida State, Notre Dame has already felt the effect right now, and he's going to be a major issue in recruiting. Colorado is going to become a new factor in recruiting. So, I still like everything that he's bringing for him, but it definitely stings a bit more when you are impacted right away, like when the first big get that Deion Sanders is able to land, you were the school the kid decommits from. And that, of course, Dylan Edwards, and being Notre Dame. But, the guy had already committed to Kansas State prior to that as well. So he decommitted from a couple of different schools before ultimately committing to Deion Sanders. But he's going to use that NIL and he's going to go out and get them. He told those guys right away. So
I don't know if you saw this. I don't know if you saw this, but Dylan Edwards actually was coached by Deion Sanders before this. I was reading an article.
I had not seen that.
When he was younger, from like second grade, up to a certain grade, Deion Sanders was his youth football coach, and
Interesting.
Dylan Edwards' father was a coach with Deion Sanders on that team. So this relationship went back, and I think that it should be no shock that he ended up kind of switching. Because I think if he wasn't at Jackson State, I think he was going to go wherever Deion was at, and I think he largely considered going down to Jackson State. But once he finally got into that Power 5 with a bigger name, and basically knowing that Deion's going to clean slate, Dylan Edwards can be that guy immediately, and have an impact.
It makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. And Anthony says Colorado's going to be in trouble soon. They're overpaying for Deion, and where is his salary and the NIL money coming from? Well, does anybody know where anybody's NIL money is coming from? I mean, it's like, yeah, come on. It's part of why it's a giant mess. They implemented this thing that they had no idea how to deregulate. The NCAA just wanted to look away and not deal with it for years and years and years, and then they had their hand forced, and you're just in a mess of a situation right now. That's what it comes down to. Fair or foul, Falcons quarterback Marcus Mariota ghosting his team after he was benched in favor of Desmond Ridder.
This is 100% foul. Come on, Marcus Mariota. You've been a career backup, right? Like you got your chance as a starter, and let's be realistic. The reason why you got a shot at Atlanta is because the guy that's been there for X amount of years left, and Desmond Ridder wasn't ready, and so they kind of picked you up as a pity type situation because they needed someone with an experience to run out there and play quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Falcons are in a crappy division and they still can't do much. And so at this point in the season, why not run out the young guy who you can potentially develop, and you don't know what he's got, compared to Marcus Mariota, who's again has been around and been a career backup. Like, I mean, come on, it's just so immature. What did you hope would gain out of that? Do you think other teams are going to want to, pick you up now because as soon as they told you you're not, QB2 or QB1 or QB3, right, you're just going to ghost them? I just completely a joke. It's 100% foul.
No, absolutely. And I mean, just like you said, this guy has bounced around already. He was given an opportunity, one of the better opportunities that he has had in his time in the NFL. It's a bad division. They're not winning enough. And it's a completely winnable division for that matter. And he got benched. A lot of guys get benched. It's like you're making a lot of money. You're just going to pull the plug and cut and run and run away from the team. It's just like it's so low. It should be so below a professional quarterback to try to pull something like this. And I couldn't believe it when I saw that's what Marcus Mariota decided to do.
Yeah, and then Jason Smith just made a great point, and he's been making some good points, I think, throughout the entire show. It'd be different if he was balling out and going crazy, and the Falcons were a contender in this crappy division.
Great and they benched him. Yeah.
There's just no reason to continue to run a guy out there when you have a younger guy at this point in the season.
Yeah. Well, and then Jason said that Mariota's getting a procedure on his knee. Maybe that's pride kicking him in the knee. It's
yeah. I'm benched now.
I have literally seen college athletes who were not performing well and went to, got basically second opinion upon third opinion to find someone who said, oh yeah, you've got a shoulder problem or you've got whatever, basically kept going and seeking more opinions until they found a doctor who would say, oh yeah, you need to rest for a while. And it's basically just because their pride was getting hurt because they, were not performing well at all.
I like this question too by Irish Chi-Town. Now that we're kind of talking about it, any thoughts on how bad the NFC South has been this season? I mean, ultimately what it turns down to is you have, you got a bad Tampa Bay team that doesn't have as great of a defense. They have a banged up wide receiver corps, a very old quarterback, and an offensive line that's been banged up. And then the rest of the teams are going through transitions, right? Like Atlanta, New Orleans, and Carolina. None of those teams have quarterbacks. They're all going through transition in quarterback after having guys who had been there for a while. And then also you got to look at the coaching turnover with all these teams. Carolina hasn't had a consistent coach. New Orleans has a coach. Bringing a new coach after Sean Payton had been there for so long. And of course with Atlanta too, they're
Well, and
going
Tampa
through a new
changed
coach.
coaches too, for that matter.
Right. And so
Even
all
when he
these
was on the
teams are
staff.
really going through the same common denominator of, new coaches, new quarterbacks, etc. So it's not surprising that they're bad. I guess it's just surprising that all four
Well,
teams are this bad.
see, and that's the thing. It's most surprising. Like Tampa should be running away with the division right now. They should have 10 or 11 wins right now with Tom Brady as the quarterback. But again, we've talked about Tom Brady and like you think that he's going to keep on playing and like we were talking about should he go back to New England and all. It's like it's the writing is starting to be there on the wall. I understand Tom Brady wanting to continue to play, but this is part of why like all he's going to be doing is chasing it at this point. You get a little bit older, your body breaks down a little bit more every year. Time catches up with everybody. And he wanted to get out last year. He probably knew it was time to get out. Then he started having second doubts right away, but then he signed this TV contract. Ultimately, he comes back to Tampa Bay, even if he wanted to go to Miami or San Francisco or whatever. But Tampa should be running away with the division right now, and the whole division is sub 500. It's just it's pathetic is what it is.
It's the NFC East of a few years ago.
Yeah, that's right. SI Sports Media podcast host and columnist Jimmy Traina says it's time to get rid of the in-game rules analysts because they don't tell us anything that we can't see with our own eyes. Do you buy or sell that?
I actually buy this, and I'll tell you why. Because, I get, yes, there's a lot of stuff that we see with our own eyes, but we don't know the nitty-gritty fine details of the rules, right? Like, we don't know the nuances and the intricate rules, which I appreciate. The thing I have the biggest issue with is you see something blatantly with your eyes. You see the commentators saying what they think. You see the rules analysts say what they think. And then often the call is 100% completely different than what everyone just talked about. So that's where I have the biggest issue is you have these analysts come in and say, oh, well, by the rules definition, this should be a catch. And then you see the referee come back after further review, that is no longer a catch. And it's like, so what are we doing here? If you're the rules analyst, why aren't you the guy talking to the refs right now?
Exactly. Well, and that's, I'd say probably 1 out of every 4 times they actually tell us something that we don't know. But I completely buy what Traina is saying because too many times these guys that, they're ex-officials themselves. And so they go on TV, they get asked a question about what's going on in the field. And the first thing they want to do is start backpedaling. They don't want to give an opinion because they don't want to be wrong on TV.
Well, they don't want their call to differ from what's going to get called ultimately.
Exactly. So they're like trying to explain away what's actually going to be called rather than give their opinion on what should be called. Just because of what you said, they don't want to second guess the officials on the field. They're probably getting paid better money than the guys down on the field. They should be giving us more than what they're giving us. If they're going to be there, they should actually be there for a reason. Yeah, and John is correct as well. They do get it wrong often. And, say something. If you're going to be there, say something. And they're not saying
bold in what you say.
That's right. I mean, Mike Pereira, he was like cutting edge when they did it. And I still think he's the best one as well. I think he is far and away the best one, especially for what he does, trying to keep an eye, on all those different games, sitting there in the Fox studios and all that stuff. I think there's no one even close to Pereira for what he does. Last question tonight, and I heard this one on another podcast as well, the Ringers Press Box podcast with Brian Curtis. So an author named Dominique Lapierre, he has passed away, but he and a friend of his owned adjacent homes on the French Riviera that were divided by a tennis court. So you've got a house on one side, house on the other side, tennis court in the middle. So here's my question, Jess. When we strike it rich, where will we own the adjacent homes and what will be the shared space that divides the properties?
I think if we're going to do it, we got to do it big. I think we got to go outside of the United States. I'm not a fan of Florida or the East Coast or, the West Coast is nice, but it gets really hot, out in the summertime and it's hot year round. So for me, and I've thought about this because I haven't been to a bunch of places internationally. I've been to a few, but I know there's a place you like, and I think it's a place that I would like, and I think they have great beer. And I think we could definitely settle over in Germany somewhere
Ooh,
nice, and hit a nice, if we strike it rich out there. And I think what would ultimately divide us is, we're not playing tennis. We're not going to be out there. What are we going to do on a football field? Run on it, put on some pads potentially, right?
right.
To me, I think what we need to share is a very large pool in which that we can ride around on jet skis, we can ride around on a boat, we can go fishing.
That would be a very large pool if we're jet skiing and boating on
That's
the
what I
pool.
mean. But we've
Sounds
struck
like
rich
maybe
at
a
this point.
lake needs to divide us.
We
Wouldn't
would own our own mini lake at that point somewhere in Germany, and we'd have beer on keg whenever we want. And I think that we'd go out into the water and enjoy it every day. That's ultimately
Well,
what I would do.
the problem with that is it gets a little bit cold in Germany in the winter time. So I would, I like where you're going. The beer would definitely be primo if we went to Germany. So that that is a plus. I was thinking like, a little bit further south, like maybe Zihuatanejo, like Andy and Red in Shawshank Redemption, down in Mexico someplace, and then we could still just have that, pool that divides the house, or whatever a body of water that happened to be in the middle. And I suppose if we had enough money to actually own the property down there, we could just import our beer from Germany. Since,
At that point, yeah. And then if it gets too cold in Germany, we just put on the ice skates and get a net and start shooting some hockey pucks out there. I don't know.
yep, I agree. I agree. All right. Sounds good. Well, we appreciate you guys and gals for joining us here tonight. As always, going to have a little bit different show tomorrow. The boss is going to be joining tomorrow. No, I'm not talking about Bruce Springsteen. Brian Driscoll is going to be with me at the start of the show tomorrow night. And then Tom Noy from the Tribune is going to come in. We'll talk a little men's basketball as well. So we'll have a little football talk at the beginning with Brian. And then Tom and I will have some men's basketball talk. And if you have men's basketball questions that you want to throw in tomorrow night for Tom, of course, you can bring those as well. So, and then we'll have rapid fire, of course, after that. And then Friday, I guess I should mention, because we were talking about on last night's show about the possibility, would we change the time and all that kind of stuff. The people have spoken. We did a Twitter poll and we did the Champions Lounge vote, and Champions Lounge ended up, getting some late votes coming in, and it ended up being a little bit closer than I thought. I think it was maybe like 69% to 31% or something like that. But keeping it at 6:00 is the way we're going to go. Ultimately, that's the way the votes went. So we'll stay at 6:00, with the exception of Fridays, when Jesse and Vince and I do the special rapid fire at 5:00 on Fridays. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, just a couple closing thoughts for those of you who haven't, maybe listened or followed Tom Noy. He's a great person, great and very insightful. And I think that'll be a treat for a lot of listeners tomorrow. So I highly recommend getting into the show. You're getting a great show with Brian, and then of course Tom coming in. And the last thing I want to say is, there's a running competition. We still need a name for our rapid fire show on Friday. And
That's right.
I will be handing out a prize to who can provide the best show. And
We had a good one earlier this week. I think it was Milton. It was I can't remember it now. I should have written it down. He put it in here. But yeah, so there will be there. So you're still putting the prize up for the winner of the name of the show.
100%. I will pick the winner, or we as a group will collectively pick the winner. You give me your address, and there will be something showing up to your door as a prize for picking. This is going to be a hot segment going forward, so we need a hot name for it.
That's right. All right. So we'll be back at the regular time tomorrow. Friday Frenzy. Tavis.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. That's a good one, Tavis. Tavis McKay.
He got it
Jesse
in there twice.
Friday.
As soon as he heard prize, he's like, I got to get this in there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, well, hit the like button if you would before you leave tonight. We appreciate you stopping in. Great questions tonight in the mailbag, and we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.